All right, picture this. It's the absolute dead of night, August 7, 1963. You've got a Royal Mail train tearing through the pitch black, barreling along its usual Glasgow to London route. Inside, postal workers are just casually sorting thousands of letters, parcels, and government docs. Completely unaware, they are literally hurtling toward history. Up front, the driver is confidently passing signal after signal. He's expecting a perfectly routine trip. But, as you probably guessed, this night was going to be anything but routine. Let's get right into this explainer on the 1963 Great Train Robbery.
Now, the stakes here were absolutely staggering. We're talking 26 lakh pounds in stolen cash. To put that into perspective for you today, that's a massive 700 crores in modern currency. Normally, this train carried just a fraction of that amount. But because of a bank holiday up in Scotland, an absolutely unprecedented amount of cash had been loaded into one single highly secure train carriage. So this wasn't just another night shift. It was this perfect storm of immense wealth moving through the dark, just waiting for someone bold enough to grab it.
Which, of course, brings us to the massive question of the hour, right? How exactly does a high-security train carriage just vanish into thin air? I mean, we are talking about a moving train, heavily monitored, surrounded by a network of railway signals, and filled with workers. Yet it was stopped flawlessly and robbed blind in the middle of nowhere without triggering a single real-time alarm. No way, right? Well, to understand how they pulled off this seemingly impossible feat, we really need to understand the guy who orchestrated the whole shebang.
Section 1. Enter Bruce Reynolds, the mastermind.
Now, if you're picturing some violent, impulsive gangster, you can go ahead and scratch that. Reynolds was a highly calculated criminal. This guy spent months doing literally nothing but studying the railway's routines. He watched their schedules, he mapped out all the desolate areas, and he analyzed the entire infrastructure. And you really get a sense of him from his own philosophy. True power lies in information, not guns. Every security system has a human crack. Think about that for a second. Bruce realized something that is honestly still super relevant to cybersecurity today. No matter how impenetrable a vault or a modern network might look, the security ultimately relies on humans. And humans, well, we make mistakes. We follow routines, we trust signals implicitly, and we definitely have blind spots. Bruce's entire strategy was built around weaponizing those exact human traits.
But, he couldn't do it alone. And this definitely wasn't some random gang of street thugs. Bruce recruited highly specialized experts for this job. We're talking vehicle theft specialists to secure untraceable vans, masters of false identities to rent hideouts completely unnoticed, actual lock and tool geniuses, and meticulous escape route planners. It's like a giant puzzle, and every guy was a specific piece. And to make sure they had absolute discipline, Bruce laid down strict, non-negotiable rules. No alcohol during the planning phase, zero unnecessary chatter, and absolutely no breathing a word of this to their families. Because he knew if a single person slipped up, the whole operation would collapse like a house of cards.
Moving into Section 2, executing the perfect heist.
The actual execution of this plan was elegantly simple. Bruce knew for a fact that the train driver implicitly trusted the railway signals. So step 1, the crew just covered the real green track signal and hooked up batteries to light up a fake red one. When the driver saw it, he did exactly what he was trained to do, right? He stopped the train. Step 2, to buy themselves time, the gang went ahead and completely severed the local communication line so literally nobody could call for help. And finally, step 3, they quickly and quietly detached that single high-value carriage from the rest of the train. They just left the totally oblivious Polster workers stranded in the rear cars.
From there, things unfolded in this remarkably tense, rapid-fire sequence. Let's look at the timeline. At exactly 3:03 a.m., that fake red signal stops the train. Boom! Just minutes later, masked men are storming the engine room. Soon after that, they force the engine and that one specific money carriage to move 800 meters down the track to a pre-planned spot, Bridego Bridge. And get this, in under 30 minutes, they've loaded massive canvas bags of cash into waiting getaway trucks and they are gone, vanished. It is shockingly fast.
But hey, no plan survives contact with the real world perfectly, right? Bruce's flawless, zero-violence plan relied 100% on the in-house driver helping them move the carriage. But in chaotic reality, the driver, Jack Mills, bravely refused to cooperate. So in the heat of the moment, a gang member brutally assaulted Mills with an iron rod, leaving him bleeding. And to make matters worse, the gang's backup driver, Ronnie Biggs, jumps into the seat but quickly realizes the engine is a newer model he doesn't even know how to drive. Literally, the whole non-violent, perfectly timed plan almost went up in smoke right then and there.
So a bleeding Jack Mills was ultimately forced to move the train, bringing them to Bridego Bridge. And once there, it was this frantic, hyper-organized human chain moving millions in a matter of minutes. Imagine these super heavy canvas bags, some actually needing 2 guys to lift them, just being tossed from the carriage, down the embankment, and straight into the trucks. But Bruce, who is constantly watching the clock tick, makes a ruthless mastermind decision. He knew time was their absolute biggest enemy. So even though there were still bags of cash left sitting inside the train, he cut the operation short. He yelled for everyone to get out. He chose survival over greed.
Which brings us to Section 3, the Monopoly Mistake.
So they've sped away through these quiet country roads to their designated hideout, Leatherslade Farm. At this point, they really thought they had pulled off the perfect crime. And you know, when you pull off the heist of the century, you'd think you'd be hyper-vigilant about covering your tracks, for sure. But human nature struck again. The crew got way too comfortable at the farm. They celebrated, and when they finally had to flee, they got sloppy. They left behind unwashed dishes, food scraps, abandoned tools, sleeping gear, but the absolute most damning piece of evidence? They had been playing a game of Monopoly to pass the time, and they left the board, the cards, and the dice totally covered in their fingerprints. It's just a monumental irony, isn't it? The same gang that executed this flawless, highly coordinated train robbery got brought down by a family board game.
Let's look at Section 4, the mastermind's downfall.
Those Monopoly fingerprints were exactly the break the forensic teams needed. Once the identities of the gang members were revealed, Scotland Yard launched a relentless global manhunt to recover those stolen millions and catch the guys responsible. And, to catch a mastermind, you really need an equally brilliant detective. Enter Tommy Butler, famously known around Scotland Yard as the Grey Ghost. Now, Butler wasn't flashy or loud. He was quiet, incredibly patient, and absolutely relentless. He used the cutting-edge forensic science of those fingerprints to systematically identify and hunt down the gang members one by one. But our mastermind, Bruce Reynolds, proved to be his absolute most elusive target.
Bruce's life on the run turned into a desperate scramble. During year 1, he successfully fled to Mexico with his family, living under a fake identity with his massive cut of the money. But a fugitive can never really stay still. Years 2 through 4 saw him forced to bounce to Canada and then over to France. He was constantly looking over his shoulder, constantly adopting new names, and dodging the police. By year 5, the stolen funds actually started to dry up. The immense hidden cost of paying for a life on the run had completely drained his resources. So, out of sheer desperation and probably a whole lot of exhaustion, he returned to the UK, settling quietly down in southern England. But the Grey Ghost was waiting. Bruce was finally tracked down and arrested right at his home by Tommy Butler himself.
And the crazy thing is, the arrest wasn't some cinematic violent shootout. Tommy Butler simply knocked on the door and said, "Bruce, the game is over." And Bruce, he didn't even try to fight. He didn't try to run anymore. He just offered this simple, quiet smile and held out his hands to be cuffed. After 5 years of intense paranoia and looking over his shoulder every single day, he was honestly probably just relieved to finally stop running.
Bruce Reynolds really did beat the system. He brilliantly exploited human error to pull off the ultimate heist. But at the end of the day, he couldn't outrun human nature. His crew's sloppiness with the Monopoly board, and his own human exhaustion that basically drew him right back home. So it leaves you wondering, what is the ultimate price of the perfect crime when you can never, ever stop running? Does that money ever really belong to you, or do you become a prisoner to it long before the handcuffs even click? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep asking questions.